Anyway, the Maudsley Hospital, yeah, they do all this brain surgery stuff. And the reason I know that is because in the late 80s, my father, who is still with us, God bless him.
Who art in heaven.
Great character.
Who art not in heaven.
No, not the big father who tells everyone
Right,
to do all the
okay.
time and can see everything all the time.
Yeah.
My actual father,
Right.
he had brain surgery at said hospital in the late 80s. Yeah.
In the late 80s, when we weren't even doing it right. That's amazing. What a testament to the skills that pay the bills in the 80s.
Wow. When was the last time you met him? No,
That's right. The only time I met him, he told me off.
No,
So.
he's on great form. He remains on great form.
Good stuff.
The point is that he is epileptic, my father. And back in the 80s, they were doing a number of different procedures to try and work out with a lot of epileptic patients because basically what epilepsy tends to be, or at least in this case, I'm not an expert, but I have lived in a family with it for my whole life.
An ex used to have epilepsy. Never saw it present itself, but it was.
So there's many different forms, right? Like so this particular form that my father suffers from is they were trying to work out what part of the brain it originated from.
Right.
And if it was a certain part of the brain, they could potentially try and neutralise that to stop it happening. And if they were able to do that, they'd learn a lot about it. So basically, my dad, which is an amazingly brave thing, I thought that then and I think that now.
Huge.
He volunteered for it.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was
we've got to zap the bit that makes you proud of your son.
Yeah,
oh, no.
yeah. Oh, don't give the guy, that's a
guys.
spoiler. Yeah. And then after he had it done, he just kept being really disappointed with me.
It's a side
So I
effect of the
started
surgery, Dad. Blast through infinity and come round the back.
And every morning I check whether he's become a Patreon member or not, and he hasn't still. No, basically he had this they had this thing done, and but back then obviously it was far more primitive than it is now. So I remember.
Oh, good God! Brain surgery in the 80s is a chilling sentence, isn't it? I
Great-
bet the
great punk
recovery. I bet recovery was just have a ciggy. Just
Yeah. Well, no. So what's interesting, I think, is that my parents took a decision, even though I think I was 8 or 9 years old, took a decision that I should be made aware of it. I should be told about it. I should be a part of it as much as possible. I didn't hide it away from me, which I didn't really think much of at the time, but now I'm actually very grateful for that. And so I went up. It was obviously up in London. He was an inpatient, so he was there for a while, and we went to go visit him. And what it basically amounted to is having if you're squeamish and you're listening to this, then you might want to fast forward the next minute or so. But it's basically a flap on the top of his head. Opened it up, and then they put like you said, a CPU, like a computer unit, on the top of his head like that.
Right.
And he had to have it on his head for like a day, because that's the only way they could get the scan going on.
Right.
And then they did ran all the tests and got all the information, and then sadly they found out that actually it was initiating in lots of different parts of his body, of his brain, sorry, and so they couldn't do much about it. And they were able to adjust his medication to further control it.
So it's so rather than it being like something that actually interacted with your brain itself, it was like a very, very internal scan. Like wow.
He's still got the scar on top of his head.
Yeah. So it must have been like some kind of like radioactive dye or something. How does it? I don't even really know how they measure synapses.
No, I think it went. I don't think it could penetrate through the skull.
The skull. So
yeah,
fascinating.
and obviously the other thing you've got to do, I'm not sure many people know this, and maybe it's not still the case. Like I say, I'm not an expert, but back then at least, you had to remain conscious the whole time.
Yes. Yeah.
Because otherwise they don't know there's any issue. So he was conscious the whole time. It's an incredibly brave thing to do. Like, I'm really proud of him for doing it, and he's in touch wood at time of recording. He's in good health, and he's he's fine. But it was just a mad time looking back on it. When you're like 8 or 9, I don't suppose you really care too much about it, because your mum would just say, "Oh yeah, it's all going to be fine. Don't worry about it."
It seems kind of. I guess
quite
you don't.
Weird seeing him though.
When you're a kid, it's kind of like you would sort of think, yeah, my dad's got to go in for a brain scan, and that just you don't really know the ins and outs of the risks, I suppose, do you? But like getting the old brain popped out.
So oof. Yeah, I thought that at the time. I wonder what the thought process for my parents was. So was it like they got me to go and see him because they thought it was important that I knew about it, or they got me to go and see him because there was risks and they wanted to make sure that he saw me before something bad happened? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I guess opening
nothing
the
bad
brain
did happen ultimately. So
no,
yeah.
I mean, opening the brain, I guess, isn't. I mean, it has its own risks, but I mean, the thing is, though, the 80s, though, that's the big variable, isn't it? Like, it's very like, popping the old sunroof open in the 80s. It's just, I don't know, man.
The fucking surgeon was probably on a BMX.
I mean, I guess
Smoking
he
a
probably
tab.
had one of those. He probably had one of those Walkman with it. They probably didn't.
Yeah.
They probably he probably had a Sony Walkman or a Talkboy. Yeah, I mean, he's probably like recording the surgery and that. But yeah, I guess like the 80s thing is quite a big kind of variable. But to be fair, hospital's probably cleaner back then, isn't it? Probably wasn't a massive risk of MRSA back then.
Well, the NHS was probably funded then.
Yeah,
Let's leave it at
well,
that.
It existed.
Mind you, it was probably under Thatcher, wasn't it? So maybe it wasn't.
Thatcher.